Greetings and welcome to ChannelEye. You are joining with Business Today, a program where we feature a lot of businesses and also entrepreneurship and also ideas where the budding entrepreneurs like yourself will also definitely be taking as facts and figures for you to build yourself to be the entrepreneur that you want to be. So on this program today as well, we have a special guest to speak about something very specific when it comes to procurement. Because when it comes to procurement, we understand from the ancient times, from the times we understand about values of things, it's been an exchange of values. We always give something to get something in return, but we always make sure back then to give the entire value, to receive the entire value back to yourself. Sometimes there can be hiccups based on how much money you have, but then again there is no stopping where you will not be able to pay because you have to pay somehow. And today to speak about this method, new exchange method, or say procurement method called the Buy Now, Pay Later, we have a special guest in the studio. This is Mr. Pasan Samaranayake, and he's a senior analyst of the Global Industry Research Team at the USA base, joining with us today to discuss about this Buy Now, Pay Later. Now, this is a term that is sort of alien to us, but then we have been doing it. But let me ask from you, what does it mean?
Well, yeah, it is quite alien. And first of all, thank you for having me here. Absolute pleasure, Warner. So yeah, it is quite alien to us, but it's actually been around in Sri Lanka for quite, I would say, about 2 to 3 years, or maybe give or take a little bit more. And even if you take globally, it's probably been around for 15 or so years, gained prominence, I would say, over the last 10 years or so. So yeah, it's quite a relatively new term. It's quite alien, but I think it is
alien for us.
Alien for us, yes. It's very much, very famous in Europe specifically and the US. But this, to put it quite simply, Buy Now, Pay Later, or BNPL, is a financing option where consumers are able to purchase products typically through deferred payments over a short period of time. So let's say usually within two months or 9 weeks or 10 weeks. So that's usually the time frame in which these payments are spread across, and they're able to pay these. And most importantly, these deferred payments are done interest-free. So they don't. So there's no interest burden placed on the customer.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. No, this is something that if I were in the audience, this is something that will come up to my mind. Okay, because like I would think, okay, I have been buying things but paying later, but it's not the same thing.
Well, it's not the same thing. So you would refer to. We have traditional methods like credit cards and maybe installments, those longer term installments when you buy an electronic device like a fridge or something like that. So we usually, in an installment payment, you usually use a credit card. The full amount is credited into your account, and it's kind of paid over time on a monthly basis, usually with the interest around 5%, depending on the time, of course, the duration. So shorter the duration, shorter the interest rate, longer the duration, longer the interest rate. So yeah, so it's usually done that way. Or if you're using a credit card, if you have a balance, so if you will purchase, let's say you go to Kiehl's, you buy some groceries, you buy it through your credit card, and if you don't pay it within a certain amount of time, you have a balance, and that balance and then there's an interest on the balance. Typically, it can be a 20% interest rate, depending on obviously the card provider. So, so yeah, but Buy Now, Pay Later is different in that let's say you're going to Odell to purchase a pair of shoes. You purchase a pair of shoes, and you basically click on the Buy Now, Pay Later option. Usually, and then what happens is that payment is deferred across in 3 installments, 4 installments, depending on what company provides the service, and you basically pay, let's say, a portion of the amount up front, and then 2 weeks later you pay another amount, 2 weeks later you pay the other amount, and then in the final due date, you pay the remaining amount. And in this process, you don't pay interest. That's the most important part here. And one would ask, so where do these providers get their money from?
Exactly.
So how do they generate the revenue? The revenue comes from the merchants or the retailers. So in this example that we mentioned, Odell. Odell will be paying around 2 to 8% of the purchase amount to the BNPL provider. So the BNPL provider would basically collect the fees only from the merchant, unless of course you are delinquent on a payment, you're late on a payment, of course, and there are late charges involved. So typically the burden of the fees fall on the merchant instead of the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the main difference.
Yes.
All right. So basically, even though you might want to buy something immediately, you can. It feels like you don't have to pay immediately, but then again, the money goes to the merchant immediately at the same time. But then again, because there's an intermediary.
There is an intermediary, and there can be a couple of days of a lag depending on what processes that they have set up and what bank they use, and there's always that. But usually it's pretty fast, maybe up to 7 business days to basically for a merchant to get their complete money, or so I would say right around that range, depending on depends on the service provider and all other factors taken into consideration. But usually it's 2 to 3 business days you can expect that full amount upfront.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of identifying, now imagine I was a customer and I want to buy maybe like a pair of shoes, like you mentioned, and I go online and I purchase it. But then before you purchase, there are options to select. Mm-hmm. So how would I know which one is the correct one? Because you see credit card options, and you see like there are other branded options also. Right. How do I know which one's which? So
very good question there. So if you go into the website, they would have several options. They'll have the credit card options, they'll have the installment options, and then they would actually specifically mention by a specific company. So the nature of the Sri Lankan market is that you basically connect to only one BNPL service provider. So their company name would be there. So if let's take for instance, Odell does business with only Coco, a BNPL provider. It's only you'll see their company logo saying in a fancy little graphic saying Coco, and you click on that option. And if you've already signed up and have an account with them, then you can go through that easy. If not, you can quickly sign up, and then they'll do a quick check on you. Usually it doesn't take that long. So it's a relatively quick process from there.
Right. So what's the difference that I will receive? Like imagine, like if in the same scenario, I go for that buy now pay later option. What's the benefit that I get as a customer?
There's quite a few benefits. So you have the flexibility in order to decide how you're going to pay for that product. For instance, and it's all and the convenience of being able to shift the payments accordingly. So let's say you really want a nice pair of sneakers, and you let's say the sneakers are, let's say 12,000. These days don't even know what those prices are anymore. But let's say 12,000. But spending 12,000 right now seems like a risky endeavor, and you don't want to put it on your credit card. So what you can do is you look at the product and say, okay, I can split this across maybe 30 days or 60 days in 2 to 3 payment options, and I can pay this off. This is pretty easy. It's if you do it in 4 payments, it's 3,000 rupees per iteration, and you can just get it done that way. So you are given that ability to spend on the things you want a little bit more comfortably than you would otherwise be able to. Right. And also the other part is that these companies are usually very transparent. So they tell you exactly what you can get, what you can't get, and it's a very and you can monitor your spending usually. That's one of the reasons why Payments.com, it's a subsidiary of PayPal. They do a lot of financial research, and one thing that they found out after doing a survey with 2,000 odd people, they found out that people who use BNPL are typically prefer it because it's more transparent, because of the clear interest structure, and also the fact that you can monitor your spending a lot more.
All right. So in terms of using these BNPL methods, do you need a credit card for that?
You can use a credit card, you can use a debit card, you can directly link it to your bank account, depends on your preference.
So you can, even though you don't have a card with you, you can still link it with the
Oh,
bank
absolutely.
account?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that's the convenience, I think.
That is the convenience, yes.
Right, great. Okay, so in terms of the merchants then, because now merchants might think, okay, if this is, now, if I were the merchant, I would think, okay, if someone's buying stuff from me and I'm not getting paid instantly, I mean, what am I getting from it?
So one of the things you get is you get a broader coverage. One of the, again, a study done by the same company, what they found out was consumers were around 40% more willing to buy something that would have been out of their price range, but they want to buy that, but it's out of their price range, or they would have bought something that they would have never bought with BNPL options. So in terms of increasing their conversion rate as
Sales.
yeah, so for a merchant that's really valuable, and especially if you're in a mature market. That is you can just get that edge over your competitors by converting a few more customers in, and getting that extra revenue. So I think for a merchant it is exceptionally valuable because it allows that option. And also so these providers don't just exist on a vacuum. They provide opportunities for sales and promotions and other customer feedback experiences. So you basically are connected to the customer, and you can improve the customer experience, thereby improving your overall operations and getting a feeling of what the customer is, and allocating the appropriate marketing. So yeah.
All right. Now, when you say that, I think I remember seeing these options online, but then I wouldn't know exactly what they were. I think that's what the knowledge gain is here for you as well. And right, so let's go to look at the type of customers who tend to use this, maybe into demographics and also into different other aspects, where you find out because you are into analytics and you know how things happen in terms of payments. So from a global scale and also maybe in a local scale as well, what kind of products are normally being bought using these methods?
So typically, these are more what I would call one-time retail purchases. So we're looking at entertainment, fashion, shoes, clothes, things like that, electronic devices. So those are typically what is purchased by consumers usually. And I would say that we see a similar pattern here in Sri Lanka as well. So those are the type of goods that that are that usually have these things available, and especially if it's tech, because they are usually kind of a step ahead of the others. They incorporate these things a little bit earlier than others. So yeah, I would say that. And in terms of the demographics, globally, and I think it's more tilted towards the Gen Zs and the millennial populations. They're more they're more tech aware, so they're more savvy about these things. Two, they also seek a little bit more financial flexibility, given that they're still developing their incomes and revenues and trying to figure and also at the same time try to consume these products as well. A lot of the fashion items and things like that are more catered towards these populations as well. So it is not a surprise that they're also more interested in these options as well.
So your advice would be, would you advise that someone who uses credit cards already at the moment to purchase things online to try this out?
Well, it always depends on on your balance, right? So I would suggest so. So if you are able to make those payments, if you are able to make a judgment and make those payments, yes, absolutely. I think if you have a credit card, you can link it, use it through a BNPL provider like Coco, Moneta, or what's the other one? And then Mint Pay. You're able to if you register there, you can make those payments. As long as you understand that you're setting aside this amount of money and you're aware of how much is going in, I think this is a good option. Yeah.
Okay. Now here's another question that comes to my mind. Now if you're tech savvy, especially if you're in Gen Z or any other gens, something you always remember is that something that you've been living with is the advice where you don't give your account details to anybody, right? So like when you go on these platforms and you give account details exactly like that, do they have any reasons to be scared of something?
Usually they're very secure. A lot of these payment gateways, so this is actually a broader question about the payment services industry, coincidentally, which that's kind of my industry. So payment gateways are usually very secure. They have multiple encryption systems such that they shield the consumer and their information as best as they possibly could. So I would say don't worry too much about it, as long as you take the proper safety protocols, and you keep your as long as you follow what the particular provider says, or take care of yourself, I think you relatively should be fine. It's not a big concern. I think people are more worried about hacking and things like that, but I think the thing is it's always a risk, because systems are now interconnected. So it's no longer the fact that systems are no longer independent. So if you hack into one system, you get into another anyways. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. These are very secure systems. They are very careful about it, and they prioritize safety of their customers above all else, because that's how they run the business. It's the trust.
Okay.
So,
great. Right. So then, what about Sri Lanka's current BNPL landscape? Who are the big players, and who do you think? If there's someone else who's willing to come in, and what kind of advice do you have for them?
So the current, I think I mentioned the big three: the Coco, Moneta, and MintPay. Those are kind of the most famous options. These are more providing to e-commerce retail. And more specifically, they're limited to the e-commerce realm as of right now. So a lot of their payments are, if you go to online store and at the checkout option you see them, but you don't really see them at the store. They're not in the physical store. It's usually in the e-commerce realm of things. One of the best proponents in this is actually Daraz. If you look at their platform, they have incorporated CocoPay into their as a payment option. So that's a good example of that. So we are saying that it's particularly limited to the e-commerce side of things, and even there, it's limited to some fashion, some tech, and not really in entertainment as much. But it's really it's at this current stage, it's very nascent. It's not really something that, it's still at its, I would say early adoption to the growth stage right now.
So for a new person, for a new business, or like someone who wants to be having multiple payment methods, if they want to incorporate these services into their business, this always, in your point of view, comes as a positive factor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because it allows that option for you to convert that one extra customer that is in the fence. I think that's always what businesses look for. Try to find that one customer who's at the edge and try to convert them. If you want to increase your conversion rates, I think this is a great way. This is a great tool to remain competitive in the current market, specifically in the e-commerce realm. But I don't think we should limit ourselves to just the e-commerce realm. If you look at a lot of these European companies, or even the US, a lot of these BNPL providers have started to provide their services in store. So you're able to go to a physical location, pull up your phone, scan a QR code, and immediately be diverted into a BNPL payment. So I think we can take a step beyond, and we can actually be and because it's been embraced, I mean, it's seemingly a success in the Western countries, and we're seeing an increasing adoption over there. And I think for Sri Lankans, typically we are a little bit more traditionally conservative about the way we approach finances.
Yes.
And specifically, we have a notion that we don't have a positive notion about interest. So I think this is valuable in that we can say, look, this is a way for you to finance your spendings without accruing interest. That's a very powerful marketing tool. And if you're a merchant And if you're a merchant, and if you have a product that you want to sell, and if you tell, hey, you can buy this and you can pay these payments over time, you don't have to pay interest. I think that's a powerful tool. I think that's a very powerful marketing tool.
Okay, great. It's most like the mirror of what we normally get when you use a credit card and you get the 0 installment plans. You basically pay the entire chunk and you repay little by little.
Right.
But this is the reverse of it.
This is the reverse of it, kind of. This is where, so if you look at a credit card, again, depends on the duration, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a credit card, usually, if it's a longer duration, you have to pay more. And what happens is your entire balance is credited. It's taken away, and then you pay it over time with interest. So whereas in this case, you don't have that. The amount that's taken away, if it's a credit card, is the portion. Is the weekly or the monthly or the bi-weekly installment.
So who pays the full amount to the merchant?
So so BNPL provider is the one who provides the money to the merchant.
Nice.
And usually the way they source funds for this is by getting a warehouse, a receivables facility with a bank, or they'll get I don't know if it's common here, but in the US or in Australia, we see 0 APR loans. So banks would grant them 0 APR loans with hard deadlines and short, time limits, and they basically, pay it back with the amount that they collect from the customers. So yes, it is the BNPL provider that provides the funds. The BNPL provider is the one who also collects the funds, and they actually manage the finances part of it.
Right. Okay, it's clear now, I guess. Right. So Sri Lanka also has now there's a gap in terms of using digital currency and also using making your payments online. There's I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but you probably know.
Yeah.
How much of a percentage actually uses digital payments and also do not. So how is this going to affect this new payment method?
So it's kind of a little bit of a chicken or the egg problem here, because it's like, so can we introduce BNPL because we have low digital penetration rates, or or is it the other way around, where because it's low, then BNPL is going to be low? I think actually, again, it goes back to the key messaging here. I think it's an opportunity here, because right now we don't have the best of one. We don't have. I think even though we are somewhat tech literate across the country, I think there's a healthy skepticism, and then also there's a kind of a adoption. There's an adoption gap as well in terms of technology and business practices all over the country. The thing here is that I think we can highlight how again, this is all about highlighting the interest-free aspect of it, and then highlighting how this is an opportunity to kind of bridge that digital payment gap by kind of implementing a method that we haven't really adopted before, and moving forward. There is evidence of strong adoption in Sweden, where if you look at the e-commerce spending and BNP as a total, BNPL occupies 23% within like 10 years. So there is evidence of strong adoption. Again, it depends on several things. We need to look at how fast can businesses adopt these practices, and two, the perception of customers when using these platforms. And again, it all depends on how we communicate to the customer and let them know, look, this is very trustworthy. This is less of a burden on you. This is meant to be a convenience for you and to make your life better. So I think if we can push for more, I think it's an infrastructure concern, and also it's a little bit of a attitude concern, and I think it takes time.
It takes time. Okay. So in Sri Lankan corporate landscape, what kind of businesses do you think should go? Because there can be people right now watching, the entrepreneurs watching us, wondering whether they should adapt to this. Should they do it, and who should do it?
I think anyone who's interested in retail should absolutely adopt it. So obviously, the three mentioned categories earlier. If you're in fast-moving consumer goods, I think that's an option. I think if you're in electronic devices, I think that's another part. And then I also think if you look at healthcare, there's an option here. One of the things we're increasingly seeing in many countries is how BNPL is being utilized as a way to pay for groceries and necessities. So bills, utilities, your monthly grocery bills. This is an option that people take to kind of ease their financial burden. I think moving forward, any and all retailer should adopt this method. I also think another area that this can be potentially used is hospitality. Already, I think if you look at foreign users, specifically those coming from Europe, they're already very familiar with the BNPL concept. And we are also seeing a lot of younger European consumers, tourists here in Sri Lanka. I think we can use this as an option. If we are able to provide this as an payment option for them, I think that is a way to kind of open the doors for open the doors for BNPL. So I really think there are several industries that could use this, namely again hospitality, healthcare, specifically if you look at medications, your monthly medications, and retailers. So I think those three areas should take a closer look at this, because this is a point of sales service at the end of the day.
Yeah, the more you explain it, the more you give us more knowledge about the BNPL system, it feels more like a grant. Or more like a scholarship for the vendors and even the like the customers outside, because it feels like you are being rewarded to find your own necessities from the market, but then you don't have to, it doesn't become an instant burden to you.
Exactly, and it's very much it's something that is meant to, again, the whole purpose of this is convenience for the consumer, and at the end of the day, if the consumer is able to make their purchases without feeling overtly burdened, that I think that's the end goal of this. It does feel, I think, again, it goes back to how this thing is structured. Consumers also have to be aware, though, at the end of the day, that even though they're kind of having this option to defer payments, they have to be careful about how they plan their finances at the end of the day. So there can be, again, as I cited earlier, there is a propensity to consume things that they would not have been able to, like around 30% or so.
And also might be something that you wouldn't even know and want.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, it's like a wishful thinking. It's an intrusive thought. You make a compulsive buy, and then, So again, it's a matter of trying to again, it's always a matter of planning out your finances and doing it individually. But that's more of an individual level and not necessarily at a structural level, right?
Yeah.
But as a business, this is a great way to incentivize spending and try to get more customers into your through your doors.
All right. Right. So, do you have any final advice to the vendors and the customers both in terms of getting used to this? Because now it's like you mentioned, like we discussed earlier. Now there's a digital payment sort of gap that we have in Sri Lanka, and also lack of knowledge. Because I've been seeing these honestly, but never used it because I didn't know what it was.
Right.
So the awareness has to be raised. What's your thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that, and to kind of address some of the concerns about overspending and all that, we see a lot of these firms impose transaction limitations and things like that. So in those instances, I think you have to always come from an angle of protecting the consumer, and even So I think that's the attitude that businesses should take. It's a consumer-first approach. In terms of, I suppose, further protecting the consumer, one of the things I think we could do is, if you look at, so we have the CRIB score, which is the credit score that each of us have. Unless it's done through a credit card, usually that's, BNPL would not be recorded in, in the CRIB score. One thing that we could do is, if we could possibly include BNPL payments there as well, that would give a more accurate assessment of how a consumer spends. So that is more of a way to protect the consumer from making a financial obligation beyond their means. They can look at a credit score and see, okay, so this score is a little concerning. We can deny this purchase. So I think in the future we should probably change some of this stuff to kind of protect the consumer a little bit more. And yeah, I think overall there's quite a few moving parts here. But at the end of the day, I think bringing this as a marketing tool, as a convenience. Saying that this is a convenience. At the end of the day, it's all consumer convenience. So I think that's where it all comes from.
And also vendor convenience is something that comes as a byproduct.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, right. Thank you so much, Pasan, for joining in with us today to discuss about this new payment method, pay now, buy now, pay later is what it is called. So thank you, Pasan, for joining in.
Yes.
So we had Pasan Samaranayake, senior analyst on the global industry research team at the USA base today, joining us today. So stay with us.